Be heading for another showdown over raising the debt ceiling so the government doesn't default. At the White House today, House Speaker John Boehner made it clear he won't allow the ceiling to be raised without cuts in spending. The president opposes that. We got to wondering what became of a compromise that was proposed last year by 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans in the Senate, the so-called Gang of 6. So we asked Nancy Cordes to find out.
After months of closed-door negotiations, the Gang of 6 came forward last summer with a proposal to cut nearly $4 trillion from the debt. More than 40 senators from the right and left signed on to what was then just an outline. But the breakthrough was quickly overlooked in the fight to raise the debt ceiling before the deadline. What might surprise you is that the gang has been working quietly ever since then to craft compromise legislation that could be put to a vote by the end of the year.
I try not to talk about the Gang of 6 because then we lose some of our capability.
Why is that?
Well, because then it's become part of the press, and then you have criticisms and judgments and everything else, which we don't want played out now.
Oklahoma Republican Tom Coburn says the gang has picked up some new recruits. The Gang of 6 is now a gang of 8, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, who have traveled the country seeking the support of business leaders.
Things move in Washington when the American people demand it, and what we would hope is everybody would demand that we would address the problems.
What made their plan so appealing to their colleagues was that it didn't take sides. It spread the pain of deficit cuts around to everyone, with reforms to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It also raised $1.1 trillion in new tax revenue by closing corporate loopholes and scaling back popular tax deductions, like the home mortgage deduction.
Anybody that's running for election this time that tells you can get this problem solved without looking at the long-term health of our entitlement programs or without looking at additional revenues is not telling you the truth.
Virginia's Mark Warner says getting this plan passed would be a highlight of his Senate career.
If the grand bargain failed and the super committee failed and things are only getting more polarized, what's the hope for debt reduction?
Well, I always go back to that great Winston Churchill quote. You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Well, we've kind of tried everything else now.
Just like the rest of Congress, the members of the Gang of 8 are often divided. So crafting legislation is a slow process, Scott, especially when you consider that they are proposing leaving no pocket of the federal government untouched by either cuts or reforms.
Interesting to hear Warner, a Democrat, and Coburn, a Republican, on the same page. Nancy, thanks very much. The U.S. economy is showing some